Welcome to Against the Tide, the podcast where extraordinary changemakers share their stories and their wisdom. Against the Tide is a celebration of courageous women who defy expectation to create lasting impact by daring to forge their own paths. We'll dive deep into powerful themes such as the complexity of identity and how it influences the choices we make, embracing change even when it feels uncomfortable, and how breaking free from labels can unlock your true potential. Join me, Jo Metcalf, to hear stories of incredible women who, by swimming against the tide, prove that extraordinary things can happen. I'm delighted to welcome Bex Wilson to the podcast. Bex is a dedicated educator and the founder of Zarach, a charity committed to tackling childbed poverty. As a Deputy Headteacher in Leeds, Bex saw firsthand how poverty affected children's ability to learn. After a pupil confided that he didn't have a bed to sleep in, Bex felt compelled to act. Determined to make a difference, she launched Zarach to provide beds and essential resources to children living in poverty, ensuring they get the rest they need to thrive. Bex is a leading advocate for breaking the cycle of poverty, driven by her passion for education and social justice. In this conversation, Bex shares her journey, the values that inspire her, and the impact of Zarach's mission. She opens up about the challenges and triumph of her work, the importance of community support, and the power of a good night's sleep. Whether you're passionate about education or seeking to make a difference in your community, Bex's story will give you the courage to speak up and demand change for others. This conversation will leave you feeling ready to swim against the tide of society's biggest challenges. Welcome, Bex. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. What we'll do initially is we'll jump into some of your background to understand about your journey and what you're doing and the exciting work that you're on with at the moment. But huge thank you for joining us. So can you tell us a bit about your early years and what shaped your journey to where you are today?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jo. Thanks for having us. Really excited to be here today. So a little bit about my background. I currently teach. I'm a deputy head teacher in one of the largest primary schools in Leeds, where we perform miracles every day, like feeding 700 and odd children in 1 hour every day. Still not sure how we managed to do that. And from being sort of age 5, I was desperate to be a teacher. That kept me on the straight and narrow, I think, throughout high school and, to get the education needed to achieve that. And I grew up in Leeds. I was born in Edinburgh, but grew up in Leeds in a local authority housing estate near to where I teach now, same postcode as where I teach now. I always wanted to teach in that particular area of Leeds, given my roots. I had some fabulous teachers that really believed in me at school, taught me the hard stuff, believed in me despite maybe some other circumstances, and that meant that I went on to have lots of doors open to me. So a little bit about my starting life, moved around a little bit, spent a bit of time in Lancashire, moved back to sort of Wakefield and went to high school over that way, but always sort of coming back to West Yorkshire as home. With a wonderful family, mum, dad and sister that I couldn't do anything without. They're a great support network, and husband and a little girl.
Excellent. And you say you wanted to be a teacher from 5 years old. Wow. And how has that driven you to get to where you are?
I think, before that I wanted to be a train driver. I'd walk over a train bridge every morning to nursery and want to be a train driver that sort of, tooted at everybody. And I think maybe that's been a part of me as a person for a long time, wanting to make other people feel good and seeing the joy in that early on, that, if you do things to make other people feel better, you feel better yourself. So I think that and helping people reach their potential as I went through my teen years, did some mentoring jobs and roles that I took on within the local authority that I was really lucky to have whilst I was studying at university. I think maybe a little bit. My mum, if she'd have had her time again, if she'd have had maybe a bit of a better start, she might have wanted to be a teacher and probably part of that came through in her work in school that she did do, shaped my experience. And I just thought being a teacher was a really, really special job, and thankfully I still do. So yeah, that's always sort of been the aim, and something that I'm really proud of. It's definitely a big part of my identity.
Fantastic. And it sounds like from your humble background, you've achieved great things. And what's been that driver, and how has your background helped drive that?
I think, I was the first person in my family to be able to go to university, and the first person maybe in my family where I had a full night's sleep with a decent bed, and I had food in my tummy, and that sort of level of poverty that my parents went through and experienced, and sort of in years and before and generations before that, it felt a real privilege to be in the position to go to school every day with your mind functioning well enough to learn something. I never took that for granted. I think there was a real drive in my family home around the importance of school and doing well, doing your best, turning up every day, working hard, doing the right thing, and growing up in church as well. Sort of those lessons around making sure that we're putting other people first were really strong. So that drive to sort of be a teacher and make the most of what I've been given and the opportunities that I've been given. And I might have had humble beginnings and things that I used to struggle with in my teenage years, like maybe not going on an aeroplane until I was 19 years old. Things that I thought maybe meant that I was poor, or that I didn't have as much as some of my other friends or people that I saw. I've since learned through the work that I've done that actually I had so much, and I'm just so grateful for that as a starting point.
That's brilliant. And it sounds like people have believed in you and invested in you. And how important's that been over the years to transform?
I've just had the most incredible opportunities. I volunteered at some of our church ran a festival, a camp, and I was able to do some amazing volunteering opportunities there that put me on a stage in front of lots of people to speak for the first time, showed me what it was to almost start up a fundraising project, got some T-shirts printed, sold them to raise funds to be able to take the young people we were working with on days out, those kind of sort of grassroots, really small things that taught me a lot about what can be done when you really put your mind to it, and the power of volunteering in teams. Getting the right people around you with the right connections can lead to something really brilliant. And opportunities like that, and through great opportunities at school as well as through church, and my part-time work at university, the opportunity to be a looked after children's mentor and see another side of what childhood could look like for some people, really helped me have that drive for children who don't have the best start to achieve that brilliantly in the classroom despite what that might have been. So yeah, there are lots of little seeds planted really early on.
Fantastic. Sounds like you've had a great career. What was the tipping point to what you're doing now through Zarach?
I think part of me, at this point, I'd been teaching for 10 years. I've been in the same school that I absolutely loved. And I'd got my dream job as assistant head in the school. I was looking after upper key stage 2, so children sort of in year 5 and 6. And I'd wanted to work in that area because it's where I'm from. I wanted to sort of give back. I wanted to see myself in the children that come in through our door every day. And I think I'd maybe stopped seeing a little bit of how tough it was for them. I think by 10 years in, I'd maybe, compartmentalised it a little bit, that I was seeing and talking with lots of families, lots of parents, lots of situations that were difficult that families were facing, that I was hearing about day in, day out as part of my job, that I'd just become so used to seeing that the level of poverty, the level of hardship that families were experiencing. And I just had one simple conversation with one beautiful little boy that has just changed everything after that moment. I was teaching, I'm sure it was a brilliant lesson, on past tense irregular verbs. this particular little boy, annoying two of the people sat next to him, didn't normally behave or present like that in class. Could just tell that he wasn't his normal self. Pulled him to one side at the end of the session, just said, "Look, what's going on? Don't feel like you yourself today. I'm getting the feeling that you may be a bit tired, a bit irritable. Is that the case?" And he just looked at me and said, "I'm always tired, miss. I don't have a bed." Just that simple. And I think when you work in a school, and quite rightly so, we have really high expectations and high aspirations for all of our children. We want to make sure that all their potential is reached, and we set them up brilliantly for the next stage of their education. But sometimes just stopping and listening, children won't often say the full extent of their circumstance out loud, either because they don't realise it to be different to any of their peers, or they're ashamed of it. They know it's something that they don't want to talk about, or parents maybe don't want them to tell everything about to people in school. Maybe they're a bit nervous about what the outcome of that will be. And for a little boy, sort of 10 years old, that I've worked with every single day, really care about, to just look and say, "I don't have a bed," was just, "What do you mean you don't have a bed? How can you not have a bed?" So then from that point, went and had conversations with my head teacher, other pastoral support options, and his mum to see what had happened. And it became clear that his mum had been a victim of crime, had had to move house really quickly from a furnished home to an unfurnished rented home, and that for 4 months they'd been living with one white garden plastic chair as their furniture and nothing else. And mum had a job but had to leave the job as a result of what had happened. And yeah, that was their situation. I struggled knowing that and not being able to... I just thought there must be somewhere where I can send a form, fill in something, make a call that will mean that he had a brother and sister as well, that they would all have a bed. Mum didn't have a bed either. And yeah, there just wasn't anywhere that I could turn to. Like, we had food vouchers in school that we could give out for food banks and things to support, and that sort of emergency care response was there for lots of things, but wasn't there for this. Found that really tricky. Went home that night, sort of looked at my house, looked at my bed, and thought, I can't do this without feeling like I have to do something about it. Spoke to my head teacher and thought, well, I could just blame everybody and say how terrible this is, or I could do something about it. Why not me? My dad's got a van. We've got a friend of a friend who's got a link to a bed factory manufacturer. I'll call him, see if he can do us a deal on a sort of 3 for the price of 1, I was hoping, basis. So we went and got the beds, delivered them, and saw that at this point didn't realise that they only had this garden chair in the house as the furniture, and there was just nothing there. And I was like, naively, probably quite offensively, said, "Oh, you're just moving in," because it was so empty.
Yeah.
I didn't think that anyone could be living there, but they were, and that's where they'd been for 4 months. We helped them with a bit of food shop that night and some other bits and pieces. And it just hit me, the reality. This little boy sat in front of me with his perfect uniform on, putting his hand up, answering my questions, day in, day out, not saying anything. And he'd been sleeping on what we later found out was a bedbug-infested old sofa cushion that they'd found. And all 3 of them put their head on it each night on the floor, and that's where they'd been sleeping. And it, twofold, shocked me that had gone on with a child that I thought I knew. And I think as teachers, we often say we know our children well. I think what we mean by that is we know maybe the gaps in their, their writing ability, or which times tables they don't know, but maybe not so much really knowing well their home circumstances. And yeah, that was that. Thought I'd go in feeling like super teacher, deliver these 3 beds, think there's my good deed of the year. And then a few weeks later, Mum came to the gate. She had a rolled up thing of cash and was bringing it towards me and said, what's this for? She said, "I want you to do what you did. I want to pay you for the beds. I want you to do what you did for me, for other families like me."
Wow.
She'd managed to get herself a job. She'd started to learn how to drive. She'd found herself a college course. She really is just the Wonder Woman of this story. And she'd earned herself some money. She wanted to pay me back for the beds and me go and do this for another family like her. And she said, you were the light in my darkest day. You were the moment where people started believing in me again. We helped her out with some other stuff through school and all the brilliant third sector links that we've got in the city. They were, as a city, I think we really put our arms around her from that point. But she wanted me to do that for other families. And I'd love to say I got straight on it, but I thought, you're joking, I've got these year 6 to get through SATs, I've got this school to run with all these children, we've got 700 of them to feed at lunchtime. And for a while it felt like, what would that even mean? What would that be? Didn't take the money, but the thought definitely remained in my head. Did a little bit of research and found a website, the Buttle Trust UK, that said they estimated that 400,000 children in England didn't have a bed and were living in bed poverty. I'd never heard the phrase bed poverty before. It had not ever entered my head. This is me who had grown up in one of the most deprived wards in the city and also then worked for a decade in the same place. And if I wasn't aware of it, really? Is this really going on? And it didn't take long into setting up Zarach, which initially I'd said to my friends who came round for a glass of wine. I'm a teacher, so I put a PowerPoint on in my back room and on the TV and said, look, why don't we set up a charity? We'll just do maximum 4 beds a month was the long-term plan. So that if any teacher ever again in the schools, just the 4 schools around mine, if a child ever says again to a teacher, I don't have a bed, we will have a pot of money to be able to do something about that so that we know every child in our school does have a bed as a basic human need so that they can get into the classroom and be the best that they can be. And yeah, that was the start of it, that little PowerPoint, 4 beds a month. They do quote that to me quite often because it turns out that wasn't what they signed up for. But yeah, if it wasn't for, she's called Gina, we love her very much. She's doing brilliantly and so are her children. For just in her darkest moment, working hard and wanting to impress on me the need for that exact thing for so many families, there wouldn't be, over 12,000 children tonight will sleep in a bed that didn't have a bed before Zarach, and if Gina didn't do what she did. And I always talk about the little boy as well. If he wasn't brave enough to look his teacher in the eyes and say, let me tell you about my life, never mind your past tense irregular verbs, this is me. If he wasn't brave enough to speak that out and speak that truth, we wouldn't be where we are now with Zarach. So, really appreciative of that special family.
Yeah, they sound amazing. And you taking that forward. What gave you the drive and ambition that you could make a difference and you could do something tangible?
I'd start with saying naivety. I think I underestimated how difficult it would be to run a charity. I think I underestimated the cost, the size, the storage, the logistics, all of those things. So I just thought, how hard can it be? Children don't have a bed. You give them a bed, they then have a bed. That sounds really simple. I've learnt a lot along the way. But I think when you've given your life, your career over to really believing that children of all backgrounds deserve a brilliant education and children of all backgrounds deserve the best teaching and the best support in class to be able to excel. And you work really hard to train yourself and your own teaching and learn techniques in your own teaching to do that. And then also to support a faculty of teachers to do the same. But then you start to realise it doesn't almost matter what we do in the classroom in terms of pedagogy and approach and text or curriculum that we might follow. If there is something so basic missing for a child as a bed, all of that, some of it may have a slight impact, but all of that is going to be done in vain if we don't have children in our classrooms in our country where their basic needs are met and they turn up every day ready to learn. And I'm talking somewhere decent to sleep, and that's bed and space in their house, and also that they've got food in their tummy, and that the lack of stress of thinking that maybe one or both of those things might not happen. Then when they're in the classroom, give them give them over to us teachers. Let us learn about them, how they learn, and do our best to create that atmosphere that means that they can excel, because that's what we love to do. But if those sort of three things, the stress of not knowing if they're going to have food or somewhere to sleep is not happening in their life, alongside the long-term impact of both of those things, other things not happening, it's really difficult then to make that difference.
Yeah. And if you'd have known how hard it was, would you have still done it?
You see, this is a really tricky question, because I think, yes. I think if I'd have found out on the first day that there was a charity that was already delivering beds, I think I'd have thrown my all and all my skill set into doing what I could to help them. I wouldn't advise people to just set up their own charity. Well, I've certainly not found that side of it fun. But would I do it all again? All the hard work, all the stuff that goes along with it? Absolutely, because I think the difference in so many classrooms, all around the country, and hopefully the difference we are yet to make, and just the fact that society is now talking about bed poverty, and before they weren't. I would have to say yes. And I thought long and hard about that one. I'd hopefully do it better the second time.
Did you have a plan when you started?
It was never the plan to make Zarach as big as it is. Now, the mission very much is we want to end child bed poverty in England. And we're really clear on that. That's only been in the last year that's become, that we think that we've got a plan, and not yet all of the resources, but we've got a group of people that think it is possible, it should be possible, it should happen, that in this day and age our children are turning up to school having a bed of their own. So it's a really exciting stage to be at now. But at first it was 4 schools, then it was, okay, well, we might do some more schools in Leeds, and then it sort of went to Leeds wide, and then it became a little bit of a Leeds headline, Leeds teacher doing this, Leeds this, and I didn't want the city. I knew the problem wasn't just in Leeds. People were, every time we did anything in the media, people were saying, we need a Zarach where we are. Children in my school don't have beds. So the idea from them was to try and set up a couple of hubs in other areas to see them be successful, and to also meet the narrative that bed poverty is everywhere.
Yeah. It's quite shocking, isn't it, really? How do you balance speaking truth to power and operating within the same system to create the changes that you're trying to have?
Yeah, I think that's really difficult, and probably, there's been lots of against the tide moments in this journey. I'm 5'0".
Powerhouse.
I weigh 7 and a bit stone, and I'm not built for carrying beds. So there's been lots of sort of challenges, but the hardest thing has been managing how we speak, our truth, and it's got to be truth. It cannot be inflated. It has got to be factual. It has got to be, this is what we have seen. This is what we know. And also giving them space to respond, I think, as well, and for them to ask questions. So having, the local authority, as a teacher, the local authority is my employer. And sort of having to say to them, look, I think we're getting this, we've got this big problem that we really need to do something about, that we're not currently doing anything about. And I am going to keep talking about it, because it's very much my truth that I will speak, because, I feel I have no choice. I've got a duty of care for the children that I work with, the information that is coming to me that feels like a hidden truth at the moment. There are significant numbers of children living in our city. Estimated in Leeds that there were 5,500 children living in Leeds that didn't have a bed. And at first I was like, that cannot be true. Yeah. It just cannot be true. And give it 6 months of doing Zarach, I thought it's got to be more.
Wow.
And we know we've given out, 7,000 plus in Leeds. So we know that that was the case.
Given all of that, what feedback have you got along the journey, and what has kept you motivated and pushing for that change?
There is nothing better than walking in with a single mattress resting on your shoulder, carting it in, and there's some excited children jumping up and down on the doorstep to welcome you in, asking, have you got my bed? Is that my bed? They quite often assume that it's going to be second hand. So when you turn up and it's new and it's lovely, you've got pyjamas, you've got bedding, you've got pillows, all of that. They are so excited, often more excited for the toothbrush than anything else, but still super excited. Often being described as you're like Santa. Just wonderful. I think being able to go in and say to children, your school sent me because they think you're brilliant. Is that true? And they often sort of nod. Yeah. And they think you'll be even better if you have a good night's sleep. So we've got you this bed and all of this lovely stuff in this bag. Let's have a look through it together. Here's some pyjamas, make sure they're the right size, all those kind of things. And Mum, Dad's going to talk to you tonight about a really good bedtime routine to make sure that you get loads of great sleep, and then you're going to go into school and be even better in school. And often, that moment with parents hearing that schools champion their child, their child hearing in front of their parent that school thinks they're great, that can just really cement a great relationship between home and school that can be really helpful if there are other things to unpick and to try and support families with. So that's been a great motivator. And just all of the feedback from parents and families alike and from schools saying this is brilliant, it's made a real difference. So why would you not keep going? Yeah,
that's brilliant. You're obviously a very driven person, and I understand that you describe yourself as a bit of a perfectionist. How has that influenced your approach to building Zarach and challenging the system?
I think I would really like everything to be done in great detail and to the best of my ability. And the truth is, if you're trying to do more, you have to make some sacrifices to what that might be or might look like personally, and also asking for help and understanding when it's not your skill set, and that can be really difficult when, I love learning, I want to learn, I want to know more, I want to understand every part of it, of how it works and how it should work, but you can't always do that. And I think it's been a real journey to sort of say, okay, we need help, we need support, and I'm not going to finish that list that I made at the beginning of the day of what I was going to achieve today isn't going to be achieved today, and I'm still going to have to go to bed and just leave it undone. That took a long time for that sort of level of leaving things sort of unfinished to be able to either go to bed or pause things for a certain while or not know all of the answers straight away, and to not just seek advice. I think I've always been good at asking for help, but it's that admitting that, I'd really like to be able to do this myself, but I just can't. And for the good of Zarach and all the potential children that it may help, doing that in the right way at the right time has felt really crucial. And difficult at times. It's a responsibility. We've ended up with this platform and support a brilliant network of supporters and volunteers. We've got an opportunity to end childbed poverty in England. That's incredible. Yeah. I want to get it right. And the overthinking side of that can sometimes weigh quite heavy. So I've got a lot of people around me that, talk about speaking truth to power. They speak truth to me for sure, and keep my feet on the ground and sort of say, well, is there not just this really easy way of doing it like this? Because you've sort of overcomplicated it into this situation. A brilliant husband who does that very well, and a dad. So that's really helpful.
You've talked a little bit about being overwhelmed by everything. You could get overwhelmed by the whole trying to challenge everything. How do you avoid getting bogged down with the systematic problems that seem out of your control?
So I think you just have to keep going back to what you know. I know there are lots of children that don't have a bed. I know we can do better. And I know there are people out there in places of power and influence that can change that. And we've just got to keep telling our story and our truth and what we see and what we've experienced and what our data shows us, and keep trying to meet as many people as possible to tell the story of Zarach, but also of all the children in our country living without a bed, and hope that will overcome some of the bureaucracy or the reasons why we're not getting the traction necessarily that I hoped we would once we had the data analysis telling us, and the estimate being 900,000 children living without a bed, that almost my job would be done at that point. I've done the sort of shouting loud enough about it until the people in power heard, and then sort of, I don't know what I thought, maybe hand that bit over then and somebody else would take that on. So the commitment to that, and all I can do is keep talking about my experiences of being a teacher in an area of high deprivation, and the wonderful, determined families with wonderful aspirations that I serve day in, day out, and see and talk to day in, day out, and have phone conversations with parents who care vigorously about how well their children do in school, but in really tricky circumstances, keep making sure that it's a measured view of the families and parents that we're working with, but also the tricky situations that they find themselves in, and just speak the truth of what we see when we're going in and out of our families' houses, of a system that is failing children in having just their basic needs met, and that this is a national problem. It's happening everywhere, and there is something we can do about it. It's not necessarily as cyclical as food poverty or fuel poverty, where we sort out one meal and a few hours later the next problem's occurring. If we give a child a bed, you're talking 8 years. We've hopefully solved that problem for, and keep the simplicity of it, not getting blinded by how difficult it may or may not be to have that final end point, but the simplicity of 900,000 children estimated to not have a bed. They need a bed.
And how does public perception of those families impact on you being able to create change?
I think it depends on who you are talking to and what their experience has been of life. So you either get somebody who knows that, and certainly after COVID, we are all only one bad day or one bad decision away from things being very different in our lives, and we can see the vulnerability of that. And for our families, it might be one financial crisis or family crisis that has led to the point of not having beds. I am continually perplexed sometimes by people who maybe their day-to-day life experience, through no fault of their own, just their job, whatever they do, is really far removed from the experiences of families that I work with and have the privilege of working with day in, day out. Maybe whether it's through the media or stories told or whatever, but their perception of families and how they are spending their money, is really frustrating, especially if it is people in places. I really would love us to have something organised by central government that brought together the bed industry. We've got some amazing partners in the bed industry that have said, we get it. We get what you're doing. We see it often citing either, it might be a director or a CEO of a national bed company who's got a daughter or a son who's a teacher who works in an area similar to mine, where they've heard the stories and seen somebody that they love and admire go to work or experience something that means that it's a new truth to them. It's a tangible truth to them. Want to make a difference because they know it's real. And I think that's the battle. If we can convince people in power and influence that the need is real and it is not man-made by themselves, by the families that we work with themselves, that I hope we would soften some hearts towards them. There's always going to be questions whenever an organisation is giving something away for free around how you make sure that it's used in its for its intended purpose, for the intended person, and we're working hard on that to meet the needs of some of the hopeful, organisations that we hopefully will partner with. But that's just not our reality. Our reality of the families that we are working with just want the best for their children. And they are trying day in, day out to problem solve on so many different levels to make sure that their children have what they need. And as society, we're just not quite doing enough to support them at the moment.
Must do better. Society must do better. What are the biggest lessons that you've learned through setting up Zarach?
I've learned a lot about the charity sector. I've learned a lot about the importance of taking people with you and growing your team and your network. And, I'm one person who's worked in one school for 16 years. And I know everybody really well that works in that one building, but that's quite a limited network. And actually the power of people telling other people or knowing other people, and that every meeting, every time you speak to somebody, it's an opportunity. I used to cringe a little bit at the amount. I'm talking about Zarach again. It felt a little bit like self-promotional, and still can. And that can be difficult, I think, when you're a teacher and a child's coming and going, "Sorry, on the news again, miss." It's a bit cringe for them and for me. But I think every opportunity we get to talk about childbed poverty, and this is a reality happening for hundreds of thousands of children, the more that we talk about it, the more difference we can make. So I think the challenge of being comfortable doing that has been difficult. I've always been quite compliant. I love a set of rules and I love sticking to them. I don't like taking risks. And there has been an awful lot of taking risks in Zarach, but also having to talk uncomfortable conversations where I think it would be easier for me to sort of stay quiet and not staying quiet and standing up and saying things to people that I really, really want to help us, or I really want them to think positively about me, either for, me as a teacher, my role in school. I don't want to bring any negative light onto my wonderful school. I don't want to risk that for us. But the fact that this story just needed to be told, and doing that in the right way and trying to form partnerships and the right opportunities to shout about it in the right way has been tricky. So, yeah.
Amazing. What are your ambitions for Zarach and your mission for the future?
We don't want to exist. So ideally, there wouldn't need to be a childbed poverty charity because there wouldn't be any childbed poverty. We would live in a society where there are systems and mechanisms in place, whether that's through local authority housing or with landlords, with licensing, that every house that a child lived in, there was a catch system where there would definitely be a bed. And we would know that there would be a bed. We would have our teachers and all of our people working frontline with children would be trained to spot the signs of bed poverty and know what to do if they encounter it. And if we wrap the training up with the mechanism of support, then our job is done. So our aim is to end childbed poverty in England and to create a space and a world where teachers, there'll still be many problems in the classroom, many barriers faced and lots of things to overcome. And, there'll be, whether it's pens, pencils, attitudes or, curriculum, all of that. But you'll know that every child has got a bed and has had a good night's sleep. And I think that'd be a real powerful starting point to try and level the playing field.
Yeah. And how amazing that you will achieve that. Yeah. Have you got a timeline? Are you set an ambition of a timeline?
It's tricky when it all depends on things out of your control, which I've also learned to cope better with as well. We've got some really exciting things happening at Zarach, talking to some people in places of power and influence, and we've got a great team around us that are really passionate about having those conversations and getting those right. So I hope that we'll get some traction with central government at some point, and once that happens, I think it can happen pretty quickly after that. Yeah,
fantastic. Alongside trying to solve bed poverty, you're a deputy head teacher, charity founder and parent, and I understand you're also studying.
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Don't do it, guys. No, I think what a wonderful opportunity to be able to do all of those things. I love learning, so the fact that I'm doing an apprenticeship at the moment is brilliant. It helps me see my children in my class through new eyes when I'm learning things and hearing words for the first time, and somebody speaking very quickly. I think, oh dear, must get better at that myself in my own teaching. It's a lot. We're busy, but isn't everybody? And you make it work. You prioritise the things that are important to you. I make sure I run a lot, because that's the only thing in the world that sets me back down to zero. So if things feel too much, I'll find my husband near the door with my trainers saying, please go out for a run. Please go out for a run and don't come back until you have.
I'm glad you mentioned running, because that's my coping mechanism as well.
I just absolutely love it. I love that you can do it pretty much wherever you go, wherever you are. Stick a pair of trainers on, out you go. I'm not great with map reading, but I can do an out and back pretty much anywhere. You can see things at a total different viewpoint on your feet compared to if you're driving. I'm doing it to reset, but also it's keeping me fit and healthy. Yeah, it's challenging, but in a total different way to everything else that I do that's difficult and challenging during the working week.
Yeah. So if people feel inspired today, how can they support your work and contribute to your mission?
We are desperate for volunteers. We've got, as you've heard, a big mission. We need lots of hands, lots of hearts involved, and there's lots of information on our Zarach website, zarach.org, zarach.org. And if people could go on there, have a look, there's some different options of volunteering. If you're free during the day, weekdays, and you can pick up a bed, or at least in a pair, pick up a bed, you've got a strong back, we'd love to hear from you. And we've got lots of other roles and things needed as well. So anybody who's willing to come and get involved, we'd love to hear from you.
Bex, thanks so much for coming today. That's been fantastic, and I hope our listeners are feeling really inspired to get involved. Thanks for listening to Against the Tide, brought to you by Think for Wellbeing, the social change-making organisation. With thanks to Louise Kavanagh at Purposeful Marketing and the team at Sticks and Glass. Subscribe to Against the Tide wherever you get your podcasts, so you will never miss an inspiring episode.